Today I want to say a few words about developing wisdom, and I'm going to share a screen with you to show you. Okay, so all of us here wouldn't be here today if you weren't interested in developing wisdom, because that's key to enlightenment. Of course, that's what happens. All of the other things that we do are also important, developing our moral virtue and our ability to meditate and various tools and practices to work with the states of the mind, etc. But development of wisdom is essential to any kind of development on the path. And so I found this very little sutta in the numerical discourses, the Anguttara Nikaya, that I thought I would share to you, because it gives 8 steps really to wisdom development. And you can see there, this is the translation from Bhikkhu Sujato. And you can see there that the Buddha is telling the mendicants there are 8 causes and reasons that lead to acquiring the wisdom that's fundamental to the spiritual life. So, that's the wisdom we're interested in. And these 8 causes and reasons also contribute to the increased growth and full development of that wisdom once it's acquired. So we're going to look at these 8. And the first one is when a practitioner lives relying on the teacher. You can see teachers capitalized here. That's the Buddha. Excuse me. Relying on the teacher or a spiritual companion in a teacher's role. So whoever one looks to as a teacher. Now, there are other places in the suttas where the Buddha talks about how to choose a teacher. And we can go into that later if anyone's interested a little bit. It really requires observing that person and seeing that they do act according to the Dhamma in their speech and their actions. And you notice the Buddha doesn't say the person has to be completely free from defilement. They don't have to be fully enlightened. But they do, you do want to make sure they wouldn't lead someone astray out of greed or out of hatred or out of delusion. And so you really check them out. And then you see that they're reliable and consistent with the Dhamma. And, teachers will make mistakes. What do they do to remedy that? Those kinds of things. And then here in this first step, the Buddha says you're relying on a teacher, and you set up the mendicant, the practitioner sets up a keen sense of conscience and prudence for them. So this conscience and prudence are, I think, really lovely translations for the Pali words hiri and ottappa. So traditionally, sometimes hiri and ottappa are translated as moral shame and moral dread, which is a little hard for us Westerners because we have enough shame as it is, and it's not so healthy. It's better to think of it as a sense of conscience, that we become sensitive to recognizing things that we've done that we don't want to do again, things that we might feel we could improve on, or that's not quite right. But those things you really have a sense, your conscience bothers you. So you become cautious. And whenever we experience that, we've done something that we're not happy with, we're not proud of, we can learn from it and go on and let it go. Forgive ourselves, forgive others. Excuse me. So that's Hiri. And then the prudence here is a translation for Otapa. And that's really having a sense of wanting to be cautious and careful, mindful, heedful, to not do things that are unwholesome in the future. So there's a sense of self-respect in this, and a sense of one's own goodness, and a kind of a care and skill that develops with these two qualities. And then also the Buddha includes warmth and respect. So the way to orient towards the teacher is having this conscience and prudence and warmth and respect for them. So that relationship is really important. And what's lovely in the Thai forest tradition, I've found, and I appreciate a lot, many of you have heard me say this before, is that you don't just have to have one teacher. Ajahn Pasano has been a teacher of mine for many years, and Bhikkhu Bodhi, and Ajahn Ganha. And all along the way, different disciples of Ajahn Chah have been teachers for me in a less formal way. But you can look to a few different, have the same standards, that you really know that what they're telling you comes from the Dhamma, direct experience in alignment with the Dhamma, those kinds of things. Excuse me. So the second one, so when you're living, relying on such a person with that keen sense of conscience and prudence and warmth and respect, then the second thing is, from time to time, go and ask them questions. Why does it say this? What does that mean? And then the teacher, the venerables, and here they use the plural, which is great because it gives that sense of there may be more than one you can talk to. Those venerables clarify what's unclear, they reveal what's obscure, they dispel doubt regarding the many doubtful matters. So those things we're uncertain about. And then the third one, after hearing what they say, you hear their teaching, whether it's an answer to your question or it's a teaching that they're giving, then this person, the practitioner, it says they perfect withdrawal of both body and mind. So there's other ways of translating this, but it's going into sort of seclusion. I mean, you're taking this inwards and you're spending time quietly reflecting. And so you kind of withdraw physically, and you also withdraw mentally to really have time for those teachings to sink in. You know, of course, we know how to do that with retreat time, but it's good to work out how you do that ordinarily. Like, how can you do that even while you're, working or whatever? What can you do some part of the day, some part of the week, whatever it is you can manage? How do you find a way to have some time by yourself where you can really let the Dhamma sink in and reflect on what you're learning? And the fourth one is that this practitioner is ethical. So any kind of development or benefit on the path requires strong moral virtue. The Buddha is talking about the monastic sangha, so he's saying you're restrained by the monastic code. conducting yourself well and seeking alms in suitable places, seeing danger in the slightest fault. These practitioners keep the rules they've undertaken. So this, I always like to look at, well, how does this apply to lay life? Keeping the 5 precepts, or if we take on more, the 8 precepts of training rules, you really are using them, and you really want to, in a very balanced and stable way, refine your moral virtue, refine your sila, so that you really have that sense of hiriotapa. You don't want to go against the rules. When we're stable in our sila, we can make a lot of progress. And if we're not, really, there isn't much progress that can be made in the spiritual life. The 5th one, they're very learned, remembering and keeping what they've learned in mind. These teachings are the things that they're learning are the teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Meaningful and well phrased, describing a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. Now, this is the description of what the Buddha teaches. So this is a standard kind of passage that you'll find in various places in the suttas, particularly, as I said, when it talks about what the Buddha teaches. And so this is the Dhamma. So it's not just being learned about other things, that's good too, oftentimes, but it's really holding in mind, really remembering the Dhamma. And so this development of sort of a facility with the Dhamma and what's in the suttas, and basically kind of getting that sense of the fullness and the range, the completeness of the Dhamma. And it says, and then they are very learned in such teachings, remembering them, reinforcing them by recitation. So back in the day, that was all they had. They memorized, they listened and they memorized. Now we can read it and we can find it online, and maybe we're a little bit lazier, less skilled in holding it in mind, so we can make an effort mentally scrutinizing the teachings. So this is really helpful. Like, now we have so many Dhamma talks available. We might listen to one and then listen to another and then listen to another without even having a chance to really reflect deeply on them and learn them for ourselves. So, how often, if you listen to a Dhamma talk and someone asks you later what it's about, sometimes we can't even remember. And that's understandable. I mean, that's the way the mind is. We have so much stimulation, and it's difficult to kind of keep track. But if we make the effort, we can think about, like, what do we understand here? What resonates with our experience? What is it that we don't understand? Do we have some idea that's counter to what we heard this teacher say? How can I reflect on that to understand where they're coming from? So they're learned in the teachings, remembering them, reinforcing them, mentally scrutinizing them, and comprehending them theoretically. So at this stage, it's not yet known directly in one's own experience, but you're developing an understanding on a mental level, on a theoretical level. And that prepares the mind for insight into the teachings. The 6th one, they live with energy roused up for giving up unskillful qualities and embracing skillful qualities. So this is the application of what we're learning. Always, listening to Dhamma talks, reading the suttas. We say, how do I apply this in my life? How do I actually work with this? What does this mean in practical terms? How do I develop myself using these skills? This is the energy. It doesn't mean, we're just pedal to the metal, meditating night and day. There are times when that might be a useful thing, but it's not sustainable, really, to be like pushing. And we're going to talk more about energy this afternoon in the East Bay Dhamma group. It's the faculty and power of the month. And here it says, these practitioners are strong, staunchly vigorous, not slacking off when it comes to developing skillful qualities. But that development of the skillful qualities and the turning away from or setting aside unskillful qualities takes more of a continuous carefulness and honesty, to look at ourselves, to know what we want to change, what should be changed, what we should let go of, what we can bring more attention to and increase. And then the seventh one is when you get together with practitioners, as he says, when in the Sangha, these practitioners don't engage in motley talk. That's, the Australian sort of flavor of it coming through, I think, or unworthy talk. So, common speech that's, there's a list that you see in the suttas talking about basically all the kind of news we hear, whether it's about people we know or people on the other side of the world, but instead focusing on the Dhamma, talking about the Dhamma, inviting someone else to talk about the Dhamma, or respecting noble silence. So in the monastic life, this is certainly kind of easy to see when you're doing this or not, how you're handling this. It's a little harder in lay life because there are so many times when you're pulled in the direction of other things, but it's okay. It's like spending time with other spiritual practitioners when possible, and using as much of that time as possible to focus on the Dhamma. It's great to have Dhamma friends that you can talk to. And then finally, meditate, observing the rise and fall of the five aggregates, form, seeing the origin of it, the ending of it. So that's the body and all other material objects, feeling how it arises and ceases. And this is a really important practice when we feel agitated or angry or sad or depressed or whatever the feeling, the emotions. And that would, you could put that in the category of sankhara, which is here translated as choices. Or you can just think of it as, there is a basic pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant or painful feeling. And it's associated with or underlying or very much the motivation in emotions. And so regardless of what category our experience might fall into here, perception, consciousness, etc., regardless, it's possible to be clear about how impermanent it all is. You see it come and you see it go, no matter how strong it is, no matter what it is. And so this is the eighth step. It's like real application. And then, there's the 8, and we're in the book of 8s. So we figure we're done, right? No, it starts over. And it's the same 8 steps, but this is looking at it from the perspective of how your companions see you, how you're respected. And it's because you're relying on this venerable teacher and you're following their teachings and you're respectful in the way you interact with them, and you have this hiri and otapa. And then the person, other people observing someone who does this, they think clearly this venerable knows and sees. They're experiencing some kind of direct experience. They've got a direct experience and knowledge because of the way they're relating, leading to, for the people who are observing, the spiritual friends, they are fond of this person, respect them, esteem them. It brings harmony and unity into the Sangha. And you might see that in families. So, you know, when you see someone develop in this way, and maybe they leave behind some habits in the past that have brought more chaos and more pain into family relationships, and then they become more stable, they become more kind of ethical, they become more reliable, and their other family members start to have more respect. There's more harmony, there's more unity. So this is true even at work. You know, you can sometimes see people really develop in wisdom, and these kinds of components are part of it. So relying on that teacher, the second one, asking questions, learning, taking that stuff internally and off by oneself, reflecting, really looking at one's own mind, really looking at, you know, what the truth is of the Dhamma. And each time the same words come at the end, clearly they think, the people who are observing, clearly this one knows and sees. And then they are fond of them, respect them, esteem them. There's harmony and unity. This practitioner is ethical. They're very learned. They live with their energy engaged. It says roused up. It can lead us, like I said, to think it's always got to be like full on pedal to the metal, but it's actually much more a sustainable, continuous observation and development. They use their opportunity to speak wisely and avoid useless speech, or confusing speech, or misleading speech. And they're observing the rising and fall of the five aggregates, and through that wisdom, it's real wisdom, the real direct knowing and seeing that comes. So as he repeats, the Buddha repeats again, these are 8 causes and reasons leading to the acquiring of wisdom, fundamental to the spiritual life and to its increased growth and full development once it's been acquired. So, having said that, I think we'll meditate. So we'll meditate maybe about half an hour. So get comfortable. And what that means, of course, is that the spine is straight. It's good if it's upright, unless you choose a lying down position. Most of the people I know find the most benefit from sitting, either on a chair or on a cushion or on the floor. But it's very dependent upon one's own body. So having a posture that's comfortable, but not so comfortable that you just become dull and maybe fall asleep. More alert. You want to be relaxed and alert. And tune into the breath or whatever meditation object is good for you. And if you're observing the breath and noticing when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out, and staying present with the breath through its whole cycle. Noticing how it feels to breathe in and how it feels to breathe out. And don't let go of that awareness. And now I'm breathing in. Now I'm breathing out. Being aware of our breathing, then we can also become aware of our whole body. It's as if we're letting the breath fill the whole body. Often in Thailand, it's referred to as breath energy. So you have that energy that comes with the breath, filling the entire body. And when the mind is settled on this, then you might also feel sensations in the body like tingling or warmth. You might feel it in your hands or the top of your head or somewhere else at the beginning. And then by noticing it, you can invite it to spread and see, taking your time, let it naturally develop. See if it can spread through the whole body. That feeling of fullness, calm, kind of soft happiness, or sometimes even a stronger sense of happiness. Aware of the breath and also that spiritual joy or happiness. Letting go of any thoughts, calming the mind. And we can also use meditation time as a time for reflection, with that withdrawing of the body and the mind to really contemplate teaching. It's not analyzing, but it's letting a question or a bit of Dhamma that we've heard settle into the mind. Being patient for wisdom to arise from deeper reaches of the mind. All right. I'm interested in hearing if you have any questions or comments about that sutta and development of wisdom, or maybe other things. Yeah, James.
So I'm kind of interested in how Sada and Panya kind of intersect and balance each other. I was reading an article about the age-old question, why aren't I progressing in my meditation?
Mm.
And one of the factors that was mentioned briefly was those who are strong in Sada but lack in Panya, and kind of practice with sort of a blind faith and trust that things would go on. I think I have a problem with sort of like the subtlety, because my memory is, I know a lot of people say they have a bad memory, but I really do. And so I kind of tend to, I listen, I read, I practice in the sort of hope that somehow I will absorb it all eventually. And I think that's sort of kind of working, but then I kind of feel like, as I said before, the one who is strong with Sada but bad with Panya might spend ages doing the same thing. And not, anyway, I'm babbling now. So thank you.
So do you see yourself stronger in Sada than Panya?
I think so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sada takes us a long way. Having that faith, that openness, that reverence, that love, that enthusiasm, that's a huge benefit. And people without much of that have a very hard time, because they're constantly doubting and questioning. And it's good to question, but when it's so what do I want to say, when it's so much a part of like the normal way a person approaches things, when it's really kind of so strong that it stifles us or holds us back from experiencing what might be more mystical, then it's kind of a barrier to have so much cynicism. So faith is important. And of course, the Buddha wanted us to develop faith through direct experience, through seeing for ourselves that, oh, when I keep 5 precepts, my life is better. I see this in other people too. And, those things that we can really validate. And it's true that not all of the Buddha's disciples had great sharp memories, the great sharp quality to remember things. I don't know, James, if you've heard about this monk who couldn't memorize even like 4 lines of chanting. And his brother was also a monk. And this monk that couldn't memorize anything, no matter how hard he tried. He had so much faith. He was completely dedicated to the Buddha and the practice of the holy life. But his brother said to him, you're hopeless. You're not getting anywhere. You should leave. So he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to disrobe, and he walked to the gate of the monastery, and he was standing there crying. And the Buddha came by, and the Buddha asked him what was wrong, and he told him. And the Buddha said, I'll give you a meditation object that you can make progress with. And the Buddha gave him a piece of white cloth. And he said, just as you meditate, rub the cloth. And I can't remember exactly the words, but like reflect on cleanliness, like cleaning. And then this monk took the cloth, he just was rubbing the cloth and talking about, I think it was purity, actually, purity. And then the cloth got dirty because of the oil on his hands. And when he saw that, he realized impermanence and he became fully enlightened. And then there was this meal dana that was happening, and all his brother, the monk, he was organizing like all the number of monks going to this layperson's house to get fed, and there were lots of monks, but he had the whole monastic sangha -1 because he had already kicked out his brother and figured he's not coming. And so the monks all go, and the Buddha realizes that the monk with the cloth, he wasn't there. And he said, well, we can't eat yet because there's one monk missing. And he told a monk to go back to the monastery and find him. And when he went back to this monk went back to the monastery, there were 1,000 monks that looked just like this monk with the cloth, because he had such incredible psychic powers that he replicated himself, and they're all cleaning the monastery. Really, this is in the Tipitaka. and then he comes back and he says, I can't find him. I don't know which one he is. And the Buddha sends him back and he says, just call out his name and he'll come. And then when he came, finally came to eat, then they had the meal. And it's an incredibly beautiful story, I think, because sometimes we think, well, I'm at the bottom of the ladder, I'm a hopeless practitioner. Please don't believe those thoughts. There are lots of ways to get enlightened, and it's mainly about being honest with ourselves and humble and willing to really listen and learn, because we're going to see things completely differently as we awaken.
Thank you. I'll get a bit of cloth, shall I?
Yeah. You go about it however you go about it. And I'm not worried about you, James. Thank you. Yeah, Joyce?
Yeah, I have to just kind of clear out the listening that I was just doing so that now I can speak. It's always a hard transition for me. And I hope I can articulate this, and I would really appreciate your helping me if I get stuck. But I really appreciated this sutta, because I have a difficulty with the imagery of the suttas. And I recently took a short class in understanding the similes, which really provided some breakthroughs for me, and I'm starting to understand them more deeply. So one of the things seems they tend to be, in my mind, because I don't understand them, like descriptive rather than practice-oriented. And this is deeply practice-oriented. And through the years, I've been really struggling with like the sense bases. They seem to be such an important part of the Dhamma. So I've really focused on that. And then the aggregates, and they're very related. And until today, number 8, about meditate observing the rise and fall in the 5 grasping aggregates. I've read that in many, many forms before. This one just pierced through in some kind of way. So when we started to meditate, I started to hear a bird outside my window. And so I bird by ear, so I was curious because I didn't recognize the sound. So I was going to do that. I finally realized that what I do is I focus on the rising and falling of the object, not consciousness that is arising and falling. Am I making sense?
I think so. Yeah.
You just think so? Oh dear. So
yeah, you're making sense.
Very profound to realize that it's all happening in here. Now, if I like that sound, I'm I'm probably going to create some kind of a story based on causes and conditions. And then I'm going to be off into papancha about it. You know, whether it's naming the bird or whatever it is that it reminds me of. And that, I don't know, it just seems like some kind of an important through.
Yeah.
Because I hear often about the aggregates, it's about their impermanence. They rise and they fall, all of them, not just the ones that are related to body and the senses.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you could, expand on that or correct my thinking or whatever.
On the right track. Because it really hit home and you saw something that arises and ceases. I mean, that's the whole thing, you know, like when the Buddha talks about, you know, in one sutta going through first, second, third, fourth jhana. Wednesday, we talked about a sutta where the Buddha talked about the four immaterial states of, you know, and of meditation and dimensions. And in the end, it was recognizing that these are volitionally created, and that everything volitionally created ceases. And so it's like, yes, you're seeing consciousness arising and ceasing. Whether you see the object arising and ceasing, whether you see the sense organ arising and ceasing, whether you see the feeling that comes up, the contact at all rising and ceasing, the feeling that comes up rising and ceasing, whether you see the consciousness arising and ceasing, the point is it's all impermanent. When we really, really get that, we let go of being so fascinated with it all. We recognize that this is never going to be satisfying.
Is there any, let's see, how do I want to say this? That it's not really happening out there. It's in here. Yes. The only place it can be happening is in here. But we place it out there. And that's where the grasping arises.
Exactly. And we place all of our suffering and happiness, the source of it, out there. I'll be happy when that happens. Or
the delicious cinnamon roll.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We'll be happy when the sun isn't shining over me anymore and you can actually see my face again or something, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. And it's, but satisfaction is internal.
Yes, and the aversion is internal too. And then you have a choice. Or you could just realize that that's impermanent. That's not real.
Yeah.
I don't know where this is going to go. But for me,
I know where it's going to go. You just keep going. Yeah, you're on the right.
Okay. Thank you for introducing us to this wonderful, especially since you'll be gone. Got lots to contemplate. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your sharing, Joyce. Yeah, Lisa?
Just a comment, going back to, I love your wonderful story about the monks, the brothers, and the monk that was disparaged because he couldn't memorize the teachings and just had faith. But also that story really points to practicing for the good of the whole and not just for one individual. And it struck me when you were going through the sutta that even though these instructions are for an individual's progress, wise practices, all the wording, I don't know if it's partly translation, but all the wording is sort of not just for an individual, but these practices lead to respect and fondness and what else? Harmony. I mean, it's definitely wording that is for the whole group, the whole Sangha, or, you know, the good of the whole. So I really noticed that and liked it.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. It's such an important part. I mean, you have to, you know, ask yourself, why did the Buddha highlight that? Why did he highlight? Yeah, others are going to see that mendicant practicing in this way, and they're going to have respect for them and fondness and warmth, and and it's because we are helping each other awaken. It's not so, oh, now they're going to like me, now they're going to respect me. If we go that way, it's more selfing. But that's not what the Buddha is encouraging. It's like to really see that we have a powerful impact on each other, and we can really help each other. And it is always, in my experience, uplifting and encouraging, and the source of enthusiasm to share that goodness of the practice with everyone. Really know that it's for something beyond this individual kind of body-mind complex here. That's actually not what we think it is anyway. Yeah, thank you. And Neil?
I just wanted to say thank you to Joyce for her insight. It really struck me, making a distinction between the arising and ceasing of an external object versus the arising and ceasing of the mental response to it. I found that very powerful. Thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Neil.
I did also have a question about the story. I put it in the chat. I don't know if you saw it. It seems like it's from the Vinaya. Is it a sutta?
I think it's from the Vinaya, and if you look at this particular monk's poem in the Therigatha, it references this. I mean, you can tell in his story that he's talking about this experience. So it's in there. It's a little bit less kind of complete in its description, but you can tell that it did come from his experience.
It really is a beautiful story.
Yeah, it's amazing. We can have a lot of disagreements about how deep the samadhi needs to be, or how much you really need to know and learn and all of that. And the Buddha was encouraging us to develop our samadhi and let it become deep and develop our learning and all of those things. And then there's just, so many different characters in the world and so many different ways to wake up. And you see them in these examples from the early period of the Buddha. And it gives us encouragement. I don't have to fit a certain mold to be able to do this. And the Buddha said, I know you can do this. I wouldn't teach it to you if you couldn't do it. Danny?
Sometimes I get so nervous to speak. And I was thinking that story of the monk and telling his brother to leave, and how I immediately identified with the brother who had to leave, or felt like he had to, was kicked out. And then as I thought about it, or didn't really think about it, it just occurred to me, oh, I am the brother who tells someone else to leave. Mm-hmm. That's in me. And how I don't see that is that I want to see myself as, then the Buddha comes along and and helps me out. But I've been noticing more and more how judgmental I am. And it seems like, well, it's an easy call. You shouldn't tell somebody to leave because they can't memorize. But I often find myself judging people because they're unkind, because they're judgmental, or they've disrespected me in some way. And it feels like, I even wrote this the other day, there's 5 or 6 people in my life that I feel like I can't forgive, that I can't let go of. And I know that I'm causing suffering, not only in me, but in the world, in them, and how I want to be a kinder person. And I'm just a little upset with like how it feels like how little progress I make in sort of my malice. Almost, it feels I carry this with me, and maybe it's a start just to become. I guess it is. This is where I am right now. I'm just aware of that. But I want to take it to, I'm not a good person. But I know that's not true. I'm a good person. But I want to be a better person, I guess is what I'm saying. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sometimes forgiveness happens when we're not noticing. We're not even focused on whatever happened in the past, but we're developing our own kindness. Because what is it that really keeps us judging others and, being restrictive and resentful? And it's the blockage in ourselves. And so we again, kind of back to Joyce's point, it's all happening in here, when we become more open and loving, loving ourselves, confident in ourselves, confident in the Dhamma, seeing how short life is, how we're going to die, the other person's going to die. And we really take that in, see this impermanence to some degree directly. And then, even without knowing it, you happen to see that person again, and there's no residue of animosity or anything but compassion. Just only compassion arises. I've seen this more than once in people, in myself, and in others. And it's there. And how do we move in that direction? We keep developing internally our own kindness, our own softness. You've got lots of that, Denny. Yeah. It's a process, but it keeps, if we have the interest, and we start to recognize the toxicity, the abrasion that comes from holding on to those negative ideas, then gradually, I think it's gradually, it changes. And we still have wisdom around it. So it's not like we don't remember, to be careful about, certain things around certain living beings. I often talk about Ajahn Chah's, idea, you need to know the animals of the forest and treat them according to their nature. That's not to say that human nature is set in stone. We're a lot less prone to rigidity than maybe the poisonous snake or the mountain lion, you know, their conditioning is probably pretty strong, and maybe there's not much they can do about that in this lifetime, but human beings have an incredible capacity to change. Even our brains get rewired. So we can keep moving in that direction, and other people, even though they may not have been reliable or honest or kind in the past, maybe that's changing too. And if it is, great. And we can share merit with them if it doesn't seem like that's changing. But it's all a process, and it's all temporary. It's a phase. Maybe 3 lifetimes from now, they'll be on the other side of things. Who knows? Who knows? Most important thing is what's happening in our own mind. That's where the awakening occurs.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Denny. Serena?
In the sutta, the part of wisdom, finding a balance of time to withdraw and reflect on one's own, is something that's really been up for me lately, because my energy's been low. It's always changing, and just noticing how I've had to do more of that because my energy wasn't allowing me to absorb so much so quickly. So I really needed some more alone reflecting time. That's been helpful, and seeing how that too is always changing and having to make little adjustments. The other thing is, last night meditating, I had a real experience, I guess heart energy, and felt like compassion and a deep realization that I really do not know how to think about, without ill will, how to think about at all the kind of violence, gun violence, war on the planet now. I don't know. I just ended my meditation with, I just don't know how to do this.
Yeah. Well, I think you already know how you want to go, the direction you want to go in, to really see the need for compassion and equanimity. That people who harm other people, harm other living beings, they're the ones who are in the deepest trouble, are not even the ones who are harmed. It's not as bad for those. It's the hardness and viciousness, the cruelty in the mind. That's the real danger. And, you know, having compassion for people when they're in that kind of state, or those that kind of wrong view and wrong action is possible, and also to really work with equanimity. That, you know, as we move more and more in the direction of peace in ourselves and happiness in ourselves, the world is still going to have all of this stuff happening in it. It's all going to still be a mess. It's a mess. Samsara is a mess. And, you know, it helps to just accept that, because otherwise we're just fighting this kind of losing battle all the time. Well, of course, we do what we can to make things better within our sphere of influence. But, you know, to really appreciate that this is the nature of this existence. And the more we can bring equanimity to that, the more we can bring wisdom to that, right view to that, the more we can bring compassion and kindness to that, the better our mind feels, the healthier our mind is. We don't have to act like it's not happening or try to, paint it all roses, because it's just not. The Buddha encouraged us at every turn to see the way things actually are. Yeah. Thank you, Serena. Well, it's 10:33 here. And I suppose we should let people go. I really appreciate all of your efforts.